Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 1.5 Million New Homes, the local government challenge, sponsored by Loft and Mount Anvil. My name is Toby Fox, and I'm visiting a different council every month to talk about what works and what needs to change to get more homes built. This month, I've been in Brent in North West London, posting a number of videos on YouTube and LinkedIn and TikTok and other channels all the way through July. In this session today, we're going to pick up on some of the threads that have come out of those videos. In the main, though, we're going to be discussing the spending review earlier this month and what it did and what it didn't do to accelerate the delivery of new homes in Brent. Also, we want to pick up on plans for new towns development and how the planning system may be letting down SMEs and what can be done about that. So to pick through all of that, let's meet our guests. Welcome in alphabetical order, our magnificent panel for today. Gerry Ansell, Director of Inclusive Regeneration and Climate Action at Brent Council. Neil Jervis, a partner at the housing consultancy Loft. And Caroline Pillay, Director of Development and Regeneration at L&Q. Also, just as a brief aside, congratulations to James Owen at Mount Anvil, who was due to join us as a speaker today, but has been unable to through the early birth of a child over the weekend. So congratulations, James. We miss you, but we hope you're having a good time and getting lots of sleep. Okay, Gerry, let's kick off. The spending review. We know what it gave us. It gave us 39 billion quid. But is that enough?
Good question. I mean, I say it's a good start because we didn't know exactly what was going to come forward. And I know one of the things I've been talking about recently is how can we boost the amount of affordable housing? We've got at Brent a housing pipeline of sites that have got planning permission that we can't deliver because of the funding gap. So for me, getting that going, giving a bit more certainty, because they've committed to a 10-year program and boosted the amount of money and focused on social housing. I welcome it. I mean, we could always do with more, but let's work with what we've got and see what we can do.
And what are the next steps from your point of view? When you get an announcement like that, you understand what the allocation is for London. What actually happens? What's the kind of time frame of the change?
Well, I think for us, I mean, we want to reevaluate the schemes that we've got to try and get her to the front of the queue, I suppose, because I think there's going to be a lot of demand for sites that have not been progressing to keep that. I mean, as we know, there's been quite a poor start to the year in terms of starts, and it'd be and a lot of that's attributable to the fact that we can't get affordable housing off the ground. So I think we'd want to reevaluate those schemes. Obviously, the GLA will be the funding organisation, and not sure if the figure's been announced for that. I think we're expecting about a third of that to come to London, but we want to be at the forefront of that and also look ahead to the next stage in identifying suitable sites.
And you mentioned stalled sites. What sort of capacity is sat there? How many homes are waiting to be delivered?
I mean, I think in our affordable housing program, in terms of sites that are there, a lot of them are quite small ones. So we've got sites ranging from about two units all the way up to 130. So we've got a mix of sites that are available. I mean, that's our first tranche, and for us, I mean, I think there's about 200-300 homes in that we can say that we can really get moving quite quickly. And for me, it's really trying to get all of our master plan sites moving as well. We had the Staples Corner master plan adopted at the beginning of the year, which really, for me, provides a good, stable, I suppose, put it this way, an investment plan. But we need to get people actually moving and getting those sites coming forward.
Thanks, Gerry. And that Staples Corner scheme, that's 2,000 homes, isn't it? So we're talking about big numbers here.
Yeah, I think decent numbers, and I think we could potentially do even more because you look over the road, you've got Brent Cross West, all the work that's going on in Barnet. So we're part of a West London Alliance. There's the West London Orbital, which links through, I think, into what could be a pretty decent growth corridor. So I think looking ahead, if we get heads together, there's, I think, some decent numbers of homes that can come forward.
Right, we're on an optimistic start then. But you mentioned the sort of disappointing numbers in London at least. Molior's numbers this week were that in the last quarter we've had the lowest ever number of housing starts in London. So we're starting from a really kind of bleak place. When we talk about sort of stalled sites, because there are an awful lot of sites with permission waiting to go across the city and across the country, often that's down to getting the 106 away, getting the affordable elements delivered, and RPs are right at the forefront of that particular dilemma. Caroline, what's your response to the £39 billion, and is this going to be enough to enable RPs to play that part in unlocking all of these developments by taking on the affordable elements?
Yeah, thanks, Toby. I think like Gerry, we certainly, it's better than nothing. It's better than where we were. Okay, so we're certainly not going to turn our noses up to it. I think definitely the devil is in the detailed detail. We know that an element of it is coming to London, but I think we're yet to understand, once the guidance has been published, exactly what that's going to be, what that's going to look like in terms of tenure types, and that kind of thing. How much, for example, will be allocated for shared ownership. So there's still a lot of detail that we're yet to find out. But it is a positive thing. I think we'd been lobbying as L&Q for some time for additional funding for quite a lot, actually, of what came out of the spending review. So and we were, I think it's fair to say, quite pleasantly surprised when pretty much everything we'd asked for was what was provided. So naturally, the question out there now is, okay, well, you've got what you wanted. Now, can you crack on with it?
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like, oh, thank you very much. Oh, hang on a minute, we've got to crack on now. Yeah.
Well, absolutely, but I think, again, much like Gerry said, it's about now getting our ducks in a row, getting our house in order in terms of what we now prioritise. It isn't enough. Of course, we need more. We need a lot more, in order to really get things moving at pace. But what we are doing is, we are looking internally at what had stalled and looking at how we prioritise those. Obviously, depending on how much of that funding we get through the door, that will also determine how we reallocate funding that we had already earmarked to undertake works to our existing stock. So there's still a lot of work for us to do before we can even begin to say, yes, we're going to go and bid on the next 106 that presents itself. We've got a couple of 106 opportunities through the two of the JVs that we've got in-house, as an example. Naturally, those will be the priority schemes that we would want to prepare to bid on. But we're not even in a position today to say to our JV partners, put our hands up and say we'll have those. So we're still doing some work in-house, Toby, but the announcement is welcome. The additional funding is welcome. We do need more, but let's see what we can do with what we have been given.
Caroline, forgive me, I'm going to press a little bit. What sort of time frame are you talking about before there's a noticeable difference, do you think, in your capacity to deliver in what's actually coming out of the ground?
It's a good question, and it's not one that I can give you an answer to, unfortunately, Toby. However, what we do know is that we know that the guidance is going to be published in September, and so we are working to prepare ourselves to be in a position to respond, upon that being issued. But I can't give you any more than that in terms of time frame, because that's a matter that the organisation is still working through, as I said.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, Neil, how does this sort of resonate? As a housing consultancy, you're working across a number of different RP partners and local authorities around the southeast and wider across the country. How does all of this resonate through all of your client base? Are you seeing something really similar where there's a kind of there's an expectation that we can do an awful lot now, but there's also a lot of caution and it's not going to happen straight away?
Yeah, absolutely. Same as Gerry and Caroline have said. There's obviously a positive reaction across the industry that we're working with, and the clients we're working with. Everyone's welcoming the additional money. It's not enough, but it's a lot better, and it's actually what the sector was asking for broadly in terms of the headline issues. So what we're seeing very much is organisations doing that reviewing of capacity and viability, and timescale wise, I think that September announcement for the AHP definitely seems to be focusing a few minds in terms of reviewing schemes and reviewing business plans. That's going to take time, though. It's not a quick process to individually appraise every project, every regen project, phases within projects. You've got an ever-changing construction and property market in terms of the assumptions that you put into appraisals. So it's not a quick process, and then you've got to put it into your business plan, your general fund, and your HRA. You've got to look at the impacts on all of those particular areas within your organisation. So for me, I'm kind of the view that given the scale of the problem, we are in an emergency. The amount of money that's being spent on temporary accommodation is significant. We've got building safety regulator delays. You've got the income, the outcomes for residents in terms of housing and health. So I think more's needed, and I think a kickstart funding program might be good to really pick off some quick wins, some early wins for local authorities. Gerry was talking about smaller sites that have got planning but are currently in a viability have viability issues. That for me would be something that the government could do, could top slice a bit of the money that they've allocated, because the top up to the AHP wasn't enough that was announced pre CSR, and I think that will start to deliver homes. It'll give people a bit of confidence. It'll give the sector, contractors, construction industry a bit of confidence, and the supply chain that things are starting to move. And most importantly, it will show some impetus and build some momentum. So that's what I think the GLA Homes England should be looking at once they are a bit clearer on the level of money they've got.
Great, thanks, Neil. Okay, so Gerry, the idea of sort of taking a slice of that money and using it to kickstart some funds, I think there are two ways I'd like you to kind of approach that as a proposition. One is I've got a fear that the government is sitting there saying, you asked us to fix planning, we fixed planning, nothing happened. You asked us to fix funding, we fixed funding, nothing happened. There's going to be a sort of sense of like slapping of foreheads and what do we have to do to get houses built from their point of view, but also out in the market from a developer's perspective. There's just a lack of confidence. There's so much uncertainty. It feels like everyone's just knackered. Everyone's taken a real beating for the last 15 years, and there's no real energy to grab the opportunity that the recent changes have made and actually turn them into a resurgence of growth and delivery. So why should a kickstart fund be allocated? Why should there be more money sort of pumped into this? And if there were, what would you do with it to change those scenarios around?
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of, I suppose using your word knackered, there is some exhaustion, I think, from various people that have been working in the system and pushing to get things done. I mean, with a lot of those schemes, for instance, these are council housing schemes, takes a lot to get to, those permissions. And, when you kind of fall at the hurdle of, we can't get funding to do them, whereas, at the start of it, so it's kind of a little bit demoralizing on that side. But for me, given that the government has now put this commitment, for me, it's about trying to re-energize that. And I think this campaign as well, trying to focus heads around this target, which is challenging, that's a it's a call to arms that we all collectively need to get our heads around it and work together. And for me, I think it's a good idea. If there's schemes that are stalled, to focus on those, to get those back up and moving, to get some confidence back in the market, I think is probably a good solid first step. And I think, in terms of the government's position, I mean, yes, okay, you've made your announcement. We've been waiting a while for you to come up with these announcements, and then there's still follow-up stages, and obviously each of these is an individual project to get off the ground. But for me, that if those wheels can start turning and we can get that investment confidence back into the market, a lot of those things will fall into place. For me, the biggest thing is resources. Because I think issues around, particularly with building surveying. I mean, my office in terms of planners we're actually not too bad in terms of the members of the team. I think you do get a certain amount of turnaround, but I know that there's a big issue across the country, and I think getting things through the regulation process is difficult. So that does need to be resourced, and that's something the government has put the spotlight on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it didn't take that long for a building safety regulator to come into focus on this discussion, did it? But just going back on that, Gerry, I've heard from a lot of developers, the just despair at the building safety regulator and the delays of months and months and months to projects as a result of just lack of feedback and lack of clarity over the system and lack of resource and to some extent lack of competence. But you're very much a proponent of working with the system rather than chucking the baby out with the bathwater. What are your suggestions for working with the system? How should it be improved and what can be done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying the system is perfect because there is massive frustrations with the timescales and delays, and that needs to be sorted as a matter of absolute priority because it's costing the country and it's probably pushing investment away. So that does need to be sorted. But when I say work with the system, systems don't change overnight. And I think, we're 8 years from Grenfell, and the fact that we're still fighting this issue of building safety and it's not bedded down, I think, to me, that's an awful thing to know that after all this time we haven't got the system working as it should be. It needs to be resolved, and I think part of the regulation is about ensuring that we have safe buildings, and it is important that everybody in the process, because it has shifted some of the responsibilities to the owners and to developers to ensure that the standards right from the beginning are the highest they can be. Because I'm not going to lie, I see schemes. I talk to my building control team, and I see schemes that are just not at the right standard. If you know you're going to wait a long time to get a decision, it's vital that you have gone down every road and you have reassured yourself that it's the best standard it can be, particularly in terms of fire safety. So that's my point about working with the system. But it does need I think it does need a strong kick to get it moving, and some. The government is recognising it, but I have to say it's been far too slow.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gerry. Fair points. Okay, audience, we've designed this chat so that you have a sort of a lively bit of chatting going on in the background while you're munching away on your lunch. But if you'd like to join the conversation, do feel free to put questions into the chat, into the Q&A, and we'll pick up on them as we go along. Caroline, we've got a number of themes going now. Okay, so we've got skills and resource in general, but around the building safety regulator in particular. We've got the idea of a kind of kickstart fund and what you might do with that if you had it, what it would actually enable. And we've got this concept of confidence both in government and making sure they're still confident in the sector's ability to deliver, but also confidence in the market and the private sector partners and the RP sector in actually getting going. So take that wherever you like.
I think it's already been mooted that we are a reactive sector. We really are a reactive sector. And, again, Gerry, point about Grenfell, really well made, because, we knew that things would have to change massively as a result of Grenfell. but we wait and we wait and we wait. And we're reactive for a reason as well, because there is a lack of certainty, from government, and that's why we have to wait and see what they're going to say, what they're going to give us, and then we start pedaling really fast. The other thing that's come up recently is retrofitting, and retrofitting at scale. One of the ways in which actually we could begin to really show kickstart things and get things moving is looking at existing stock and the whole retrofit program. But even that is challenged by the lack of skills and resources in that area. So it's every which way and angle we go, there is a challenge, whether it's skills, whether it's funding, whether it's just guidance that we're not certain about. So there is a lot that's sort of holding us back. A Kickstart fund, again, you'll never find me say anything against any funding. So if a Kickstart fund could be looked at, then yes, let's have a look at it, because what that will enable us to do, as already been mentioned, is look at where the quick wins might be, is look at those schemes that are stalled and how we can utilize that Kickstart funding to bring those schemes forward. From an L&Q point of view, we've got a number of tall buildings, both existing and new. We've only just got the first scheme through BSR. Originally programmed to take 3 months, it's taken 14 months. So, wow. Projects that we are programming, schemes that we are programming, where we are, our contractors are looking at sort of 3 months, we're saying you're going to need to elongate that. And so there does need to be a lot more change in the system to simplify things. For us to be ready, government also has to be ready by providing the funding, even for the skills development, for the training, especially when we know what's coming down the line. And actually, we have known what's coming down the line, but we've been really slow to react. I think just talking around improving processes. The other thing that does stifle us is statutory consultees, and and the amount of time that takes to get anything through. That needs to be simplified. We lose months, we lose millions just because of the time it takes to get through statutory consultees. And I'm not sure that we've done enough to look at that as part of the planning reforms, and that does need revisiting. I can't remember the other point that you made, Toby.
It's really around
I'll come back
confidence.
to
Just putting confidence back into the sector. Well, what it's going to take to get people to start saying, not saying, okay, you've made this fix, you've provided us with this funding or this change to regulation, but there are still all these other reasons why we can't do anything, and just turn that mindset around into, okay, we've now got an opportunity we didn't have before. What can we do with it?
Yeah, and I think it's the answer has to be looking at the lower hanging fruits. What can we deliver to show confidence? Confidence at the end of the day it's purely about delivery. You've got to see, bricks being laid, planning applications going in, being granted. That's where the confidence is when people see buildings coming out of the ground, when people see the numbers of people in temporary accommodation reducing, the money that we are spending on temporary accommodation reducing, which at the end of the day is public money. So it is, what are those low-hanging fruits? How can we collaborate with each other, whether it's RPs and local authorities, or local authorities to identify those low-hanging fruits, so that we can begin to deliver for our communities. That's what people need to see, is buildings coming out of the ground. There is no other way that we can provide confidence.
Thanks, Caroline. Okay, Neil, feel free to pick up on any of those threads, but I just want to add one to the mix. We held a round table yesterday with councils and developers to talk about some of these issues, and one of the things that came up is the idea of just building what we can. So rather than waiting to be able to unlock a scheme to deliver 50% or 35% affordable, can we not just get on and build the houses we can? And if that means it's 10% now or 5% even, or maybe even none, we can get around to building those affordable homes later when the market picks up. But we've got a job to do to just kickstart everything, as to use that phrase again. Neil, what's your view on that? What would you say to a developer or a council that came to you with that proposition?
So, I mean, I think there's always room to get things moving, and sometimes you have to make decisions which are a bit more difficult to get homes built and to get projects started. So I'd always advocate that's an approach that every council and developer or housing association should be looking at, and understanding whether that's an option to be able to just get moving, but not get everything you want out of it. But the purpose of the suggestion around a kickstart program for the government would be that it's not just politically expedient, but it's financially beneficial, and it will start to see some outputs in terms of housing. So it's got to be attractive for the housing associations and local authorities. It has to be an additional attractive amount of funding, and that is going to cost money, and that is going to take some money from that overall 39 billion pot. But for me, it's a no-brainer. I think it's something that over the next, because they're not going to see starts, they're not going to see the progress, because this is going to take too much time for people to review their business plans. Whereas if you were to offer them a top slice amount on top of a normal grant amount that is relative to some of the viability gaps that people are seeing, quicker decisions may be able to be made in terms of finance Section 151 officers approving projects that progress. So yeah, I think that it feels like a no-brainer to me to do that.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Gerry, again, we've got lots of threads dangling now, so grab hold of any of those you like, and I'm going to throw yet another one in, which is, we were having a conversation before this session around SMEs, both as developers and also within the construction sector, and whether we're doing enough to support SMEs through planning and through procurement, and why that matters. Does that actually matter? And that's on the back of a conversation I had this morning with a council-owned developer in Bexley in southeast London, who is contracting only local SMEs to build out their schemes, and is getting some benefits from that in terms of pricing and in terms of consistency and in terms of the social impact, locally economic impact of its activity. So there's another one for you. Feed on it all.
Yeah, I similarly was having a conversation with one of the sort of medium-sized builder earlier today, and example that I was given was a shortage of quantity surveyors. And as it happened yesterday, straight after the round table, I went rushing off to Wembley Jobs Fair, and this was at Wembley Stadium. There's a good contingent of the stalls there was around trying to attract people into construction, because there's a massive shortage, and it's industry wide. And so I think a lot of the businesses are finding that if they don't put money into this to try to secure numbers of staff, and it's the same we can't recruit building surveyors. Really struggling. We've got 3 vacancies at the moment. We're really struggling to fill those posts, and getting experienced surveyors is extremely difficult, I think, because everybody wants whoever's available. So that's very difficult. I think on the SME issue, it's I think they have a quite a difficult challenge. Because they're part of the market and part of the delivery process, but it feels like we need to give them a step up, because I think some of the bigger sites, they'll take their own course, and they have more resources to throw at them. There's economies of scale and so on. There's normally a master plan or an allocation behind it, but I think some of the smaller scale sites, they get a lot of opposition as well. Getting through the planning process is very, very difficult. So for me to give them a little bit more freedom of movement, whether that's through planning, through other financial incentives, I think would be useful. And I think that overall kind of raising all boats, I think, in terms of trying to get more people into the construction sector, whether it's public or private sector, is vital.
And that's at all levels, isn't it? We were talking about shortages of scaffolders before this session, as well as surveyors, as well as asset managers. It's right across all of the professions. It feels like so. There's a sort of emerging idea of a housing workforce, which covers all of those levels, and some sort of drive or strategy across the whole of that workforce.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely essential. I think the government has got some spotlight on this, I think, in terms of trying to ensure that planning departments are resourced, but I have to say the funds are just not even making a dent, to be honest. But it really does feel that there needs to be a much more focus on drawing people in and trying to generate a decent amount of funding, and I think working with the private sector as well. I mean, my immediate issue is trying to get funding to do the next local plan, which is obviously if there is money coming in, £39 billion, we've got a new planning reforms coming in, we need to be able to deliver that quite quickly to again provide that framework of the next generation of sites.
Absolutely. And just before we move on to Caroline, I'm going to come to you and ask you about the kind of recruitment and skills development aspect. But Gerry, just before we leave you, I'd like to ask you about that proposition of build what you can. So if a developer comes along and says, I can build it out, but you're not going to get 35%, you're only going to get 25% affordable. How do you respond to that? And does there come a point where you say, okay, well, we just got to build what we can?
Oh, I think there is, absolutely. I mean, viability is a factor, and I think the whole thing about placemaking, creating decent homes, keeping the pace of building up as well, I think is very important. And obviously the economic cycles move up and down, and at certain points in time you're not going to get as much as affordable homes. But I think it's important that the system is geared to trying to do that, because as was said earlier, the cost of temporary homelessness, the worsening affordability issues can't be ignored.
Right, thanks, Gerry. Caroline, just going back to that skills pool issue then. So what can the G15 be doing about this? What are you doing?
Training as many people as we possibly can. There are academies, I think, that are, and that is quite encouraging. There are a few academies that are out there, to train people into the sector. I was recently spending time with my 23-year-old nephew, who's a bit of a loss actually as to what he wants to do, and he saw it wise enough to come and talk to me because he knows I'm in the sector. He's really interested in retrofit, again, and he just wanted some direction as to how he can get into that arena without having the prior qualifications. I think one of the biggest challenges that he faced, using him as an example, was actually being able to secure a training apprenticeship program. I think that's actually quite complicated, a lot more complicated than I think it needs to be. Apart from nothing else, you've got a group of young people who either don't have the qualifications to actually get onto an apprenticeship program, which is the irony of it actually, because originally it was all about you're not having any qualifications, we'll train you in the job. But now you've got to have certain qualifications to actually get onto an apprenticeship program in order to be trained for a job. And so that remains somewhat of a barrier for him. But there are, in our search, we came across lots of skills centres. There's one in Stratford, and lots of other places, which is encouraging to see, a number of the courses that are on offer. But again, one of the other challenge for him was being able to afford to actually get himself onto some of these courses. So the want is there, the desire is there, but he doesn't have the capacity to be able to fund himself on those courses. And I think that's perhaps another area that maybe the G15 could come together and look at how, we can fund young men like my nephew who are showing a genuine interest in coming into the sector. I think the other thing that we talk about the challenges of resourcing our sector, and we've been talking about it for years and years and years. It's not, for some reason or not, it still doesn't appear to be, this sexy place to work, but actually it's a fantastic place to work, and we don't shout about it enough. I think we get contractors, obviously, that go into schools as part of their social value response when they've been appointed, onto a job. But we need, again, to be a bit more preemptive. I think we need to take it, beyond the schools. Absolutely, start at the schools, start slightly lower down, so that people know what's available to them in the construction industry, from architecture right through to scaffolding, as we've just mentioned, and taking that right through the education system upwards. But let's really start slow. So I think coming back, I think that definitely is a lot that the G15 could be doing. For me, it's looking at ways in which we can simplify the apprenticeship programme, and ways in which we can provide some sort of funding to enable young people to actually find their way through these courses that are available, so that we have those resources at the end of the day. And if you look at these courses as well, some of them start, they are free, some of them are free, a couple of hours training to tell you what retrofitting is, right through to £3,000, £4,000. 23-year-old lad isn't going to have that sort of funding available to him, to be able to train, so that because he is exactly the sort of people that we need coming out of the other end, because that passion is there, that interest is there, and that ability to want to learn is there. He's fortunate enough because he's come to me as somebody in the sector that he knows, and I can guide him through that process. But I don't think that guidance is readily available out there for others, Toby.
That's right. We can't be relying on nepo babies for the future, can we? We need to cast the net a lot wider. Okay, Neil, lots and lots of things for you to feast on there. I'm going to throw another one at you. So there was a Historic England report published recently that said, or claimed, that 670,000 homes could be delivered by reusing listed buildings. Right, so that doesn't even count non-listed buildings, and they're calling on dropping VAT to bring those into use, or some sort of financial incentive to developers to repurpose listed buildings. What's your response to that? Does that sound like a goer to you?
Yes, of course. I mean, we should be looking to use every spare building that we've got that is suitable for housing. I know there are issues around permitted developments and the quality of those, so you've got to back that up with ensuring the quality. What I would say, just temper, and Gerry will no doubt have a response to this, is that having been involved in a few listed projects and working with clients who have been, they are very complicated. They obviously need a particular skill set for people to manage those, but also they're a challenge working with planners and conservation officers, as well as the agencies that manage those buildings as well. So and to preserve them. So and
Caroline's just been talking about the complexity of consultation as it is.
Yes, yeah, and I think that. So yes, but with a caveat. It's probably what I'd say. And in terms of, I'll echo what Caroline was saying on skills. I mentioned this at the roundtable on Monday. It needs something else. The young people I've spoken to and been into schools, they don't know about construction. So, and I've mentioned this previously, but I think it needs a coordinated national campaign. It needs the government to be throwing stuff out on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever the kids are and the young people are using now. We've seen even this program this campaign has hit sort of quite good numbers with TikTok and others, other social media platforms. So it needs something. There's loads of stuff going on. There's money going into it. most of the industries are consciously aware of it and they're trying to do something about it. But I think it needs to be brought together into something that I see on TV, during the adverts. So however it gets across, they need to find a way to promote it as a really interesting and fulfilling career. I think both from at all levels, from scaffolding to project director or whatever. So yeah, I think I would advocate that. Who does that? I don't know, but the message needs to get to MHCLG that it's needed, I think.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And just you were referring to this campaign. That's the 1.5 million new homes campaign.
Yeah.
We've got something like 45,000 views on TikTok so far, and that's including a number of young and old, senior, I should say, professionals in the sector, just talking about their careers and passing on advice for people considering how to get into public sector housing delivery, particularly. And we're still, at base camp with that. We're really exploring what the platform offers, but there's definitely a lot that can be done to reach out. I think one of the problems that I perceived in that is that you have a number of different sectors within the house building industry, if you like. So and you've got regulatory bodies, you've got professional bodies for each of those, and that sort of seems to get in the way of a concerted effort to demonstrate and illustrate the breadth of careers and choices that there are across the sector. But the government is moving towards a single building regulator now, and that may be an indication that there's a bit of consolidation around the kind of governance of the industry, and that might enable a sort of a wider view on recruitment. Caroline, I've said something that's either annoyed you or piqued your interest.
I mean, actually, the fact that we've got such a breadth of professions and skills and areas of the industry is actually what makes it really quite exciting. You think about the medical industry, it is just as diverse. You've got GPs, you've got doctors, you've got foot doctors, heart doctors. It's the same, actually, and people know about that, and that is just as regulated as our sector is, actually. So I think that is something that we do need to really get out there, is just how much in terms of possibilities and different areas that young people could go into, from ground literally up, from the desk, in terms of design, right through to project management, right through to housing management. It is broad, but I think that's what makes it really exciting, Toby.
Yeah, I completely agree. Gerry, I just want to come back to you on this listed buildings idea. How many listed buildings are there in Brent that could be converted into housing? And do you see that as an opportunity or a nightmare?
I'm tempted to say nightmare, but I mean, I'd say we look at anything, and actually heritage is something I do value greatly, and I think Brent has got some wonderful conservation areas and listed buildings, but in terms of yielding anything decent in terms of numbers, I don't really see that. I wouldn't put it anywhere near the top of the list. I mean, for me, I think the government's initiatives around new towns and grey belt, I think those are the things I think that can really boost some numbers. It will take some time, but I really do think that for me, the green belt one is something I've been looking at. Brent doesn't have any green belt, but I've been looking at that subject for quite a few years, and I've always felt that we needed a fresh look at that, and that can yield some decent numbers if it's done in the right way.
But we've got to think strategically and clearly about where those numbers are going, right?
Absolutely. And I think, if you look at London, the green belt stretches out, I think, about 30 miles around London. It's way bigger than it was ever intended to be. Not all of it functions as it should. There's a lot of, as it's now defined, grey belt, where there's opportunities that needs to be sustainably located. It needs to be on good transport links. The thing I think that's possibly missing that probably needs to be developed a bit more is around infrastructure provision, because I think for me, infrastructure always seems to be catching up behind. We overload our systems, we'll overload our transport system, then we start, because it takes such a long time. If you look at HS2 or any of the big rail schemes, it's decades. We need to do this much faster, and we need to get ahead to really see that facilitates development. I mean, one little anecdote was when I used to work for Waltham Forest many years back. Stratford City was a kind of thing before the Olympics came along, and it wasn't until I saw that rail station arrive right in the middle of a development site that I thought, right, they've got the infrastructure in, things are going to happen.
Yep. And same on Nine Elms, right? This is, we've had hundreds of years to learn the lesson that you build a railway and then you build some houses around it, and it sort of beggars belief that doesn't, it's just not standard practice. But Gerry, I feel this is a good note. Oh, well, we're out of time, so we've got to end there. But we'll let you have the last word in terms of Greenbelt and infrastructure delivery, and end the session. Hopefully, not too many of our audience were confused by the change in our timings from 12:15 to 1. We were doing that because we noticed that starting at 12:30, a lot of people were leaving the session at 1 o'clock, presumably to go off to calls. So we've switched around for that reason. Thank you for staying with us during this session, and warmest thanks to you for paying attention throughout your lunch hour, and thank you to our fantastic speakers for keeping the conversation so lively and quick moving. I'm sort of sorry for throwing so much at you, but sort of really glad that I did, because you responded really ably and well, and it was a really interesting conversation. I appreciate it. And thank you very much to Gerry Ansell from the London Borough of Brent, and thank you to Caroline Pillay from L&Q, and thank you to Neil Jervis from Loft, both for your contribution to the conversation and also for the sponsorship, which is, along with Mount Anvil, has made the webinar and the whole Brent season possible. Congratulations to James Owen. And thanks, audience, again for sticking around during your lunch hour. We're going on holiday now, but we're going to be back in the autumn with seasons from Sutton, from Barnet and from Stevenage. So watch out for those, and watch out for our special compilation videos out over the summer, our report from yesterday's roundtable workshop, and our forthcoming annual report on what we've learned from councils in building 1.5 million new homes. All of that is to come. In the meantime, thanks again to everyone at Brent Council and Mount Anvil and Loft, and to our audience for your contribution to 1.5 million new homes. Thank you.